everybody, David Schuster here. There are new calls for the Democratic Party to make some dramatic changes. What started after the November election losses as a trickle of frustrations has become a fire hose. And now one of America's most powerful union bosses, Teamsters President Sean O'Brien, is calling for an immediate and sweeping shakeup in Democratic Party leadership.
They've got a lot of soul searching to do. And look, I said this earlier today in another interview that, the Democrat Party needs to take a look in the mirror and say, maybe Chuck Schumer's time is over. Maybe Pelosi's time is over. Let's figure out who's going to be the best for the party. And look, as an organization, we're always looking at how do we leave this organization better than we found it. I think that needs to be the focus. Look, we all have pensions for a reason. That's to use them and retire and enjoy your life. Maybe they should take a page out of Joe Biden's book and step aside.
Use your pensions and retire, Nancy Pelosi and Chuck Schumer. The issue, in my view, is not the age of Pelosi, who was 84, or Schumer, who was 74, and it's not their appearance. The problem, according to many rank-and-file Democrats, is that the party leadership has ideas that are old or that seem to be a continuation of the status quo. Yes, Democratic leaders have talked about raising the minimum wage, closing the wealth gap, and expanding health care, but nothing dramatic has been done in 16 years. There hasn't been a serious legislative proposal or campaign for something big and ambitious like Medicare for all. Bernie Sanders is the only one who ever talks about it, and he is stifled by fellow Democrats. The minimum wage of $7.25 an hour has been stuck there for 15 years. And for all of the talk about making the wealthy and rich pay their share, Democratic leaders seem more worried about going against their Wall Street campaign donors than in taxing them. So the result is a Democratic Party that only seems to stand for protecting the progress that's already been made and taking incremental steps forward, or changes at the margins. Here's an example. During the 2024 presidential campaign, Kamala Harris proposed expanding the business startup tax breaks from $5,000 to $50,000. Great idea, and it got support across the political spectrum. But is that the sort of idea that inspires a movement and brings new energy to the Democratic Party? The answer is no. And we saw that in the malaise that many voters felt towards Harris. Most voters viewed her and the Democratic Party as the party of the establishment and a continuation of the status quo. The argument was that Donald Trump is a threat to stability and democracy, but voters wanted change, and the Democrats, instead of promoting big changes, fell flat. The party had been warned that many working-class Americans and people living paycheck to paycheck didn't see much of a distinction between Democratic economic interests and Republicans. Here's prominent public intellectual Dr. Cornel West.
Both parties stand in the way of the empowerment of poor and working peoples. Both parties tied Wall Street, militarism, Pentagon, tied to Silicon Valley. What about the 60% of precious Americans of all colors who are struggling every day and month to put food on the table and are hardly doing it, while the 1% is simply tied to their quests for the luxurious life? American democracy not just is at stake, the whole planet, Brother Jake. You know that, man, with fossil fuels. And look at the debt ceiling agreement. We can make a deal with Brother Manchin in terms of his pipeline that will do in not just working class people's spaces, but ecological collapse given what's going on the East Coast. But we can't make a deal with him in terms of voting rights in regard to the filibuster. That's Brother Biden. We need something better. Where's the best of the country?
The best of the country for many of us is when the United States takes on big, ambitious things. Things that seem impossible. Invading the beaches of Normandy and freeing an entire continent from tyranny. Putting a man on the moon. Curing diseases. Cultivating the world's greatest economy, finding and eliminating the planet's most notorious terrorists. America's biggest achievements are second to none, but the Democratic Party currently seems to stand for doing new things that are relatively small. And so, American voters, for the most part, have been left uninspired and are willing to take a chance on the huge changes that Donald Trump has promised. The answer gets to something that we heard from both Dr. Cornel West and from Teamsters President Sean O'Brien. Democrats need to retire the status quo leadership in the party, elevate younger, more dynamic voices, and promote the progressive legislative agenda big time. At a time when Americans across the political spectrum agree that our for-profit healthcare system is despicable and that the anger of an assassin is understandable, Democrats should be leading the calls for dramatic health insurance change. Democrats should put Medicare for all on the table. Don't just give Bernie Sanders a platform. Make Medicare for all a pillar of what the Democratic Party stands for, introduce legislation, make it a daily topic of discussion and debate, and reclaim the Democratic Party's mantle as the party that wants to make life better for all Americans, not just the wealthiest few. And by the way, polls show that more than 65% of Americans support universal health care. Even a majority of Republicans support Medicare for all. So embracing it is not a huge political risk. It just risks turning off some of the Democratic Party's mega donors from the health care insurance industry. But the Democratic Party has to make a choice. Continue being beholden to rich and powerful corporate interests and keep losing ordinary Americans, or stand for things that are inspiring and dramatic, create a new enthusiastic political movement, and reinvigorate the Democratic Party. In my view, the choice is easy and clear, but the political establishment in America is tough to dislodge. And there are some Democrats who will privately tell you they would rather have Donald Trump in the White House than lose the Democratic Party mega donors. Money talks, and it is hard to defeat. But Democratic Party election defeats will keep coming, and so much progress that's been made in recent decades will be lost if the Democratic Party does not change. I'm David Schuster. Thanks for joining us.